Hey guys, it's Courtney, and today we are going to be talking about some of the very common mistakes that we've all made while creating our cards. Some of them are super easy to fix, and others just take a little bit more creativity to at least cover up the mistakes. Some of the mistakes that I've made in this video have been on purpose, and others haven't been. So it was just a happy accident. But I do want to let you guys know that nobody expects perfection, or at least I don't. As a recipient of cards and one that views cards on social media and on YouTube, I never expect anything to be perfect. These are handmade, and more than likely the person that's either looking at them online or even receiving the card in the mail never knows that there was a mistake made. So they don't know to look for it, and they more than likely wouldn't be able to spot it out. You as the creator know exactly where that mistake is or that error was made, and you can spot it out in a second. But more than likely, nobody else can. So don't stress about your cards being absolutely perfect. They're handmade and they're special to whoever is going to receive them. So for our very simple card that we're going to be making today, I'm going to be using the Courtney Loves Kitty stamp set by Stamping Bella, which is so fitting for me. And the first mistake we're going to talk about is a crooked stamped image. Now this is a perfect image to stamp crooked because it is a rubber stamp, so I can't see where I'm stamping. But I did bring out my mini Misty here, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp this with blackout ink by Ink on 3. I did stamp it twice, and I purposely stamped it crooked, but I honestly didn't have to purposely do it because more than likely it would have been crooked anyway. I stamped this twice onto a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and you can see once I bring out, you can see but by the eye, but once I bring out the T-square ruler, you can see exactly how crooked that is. Now, a couple ways you can fix that. You can either trim down your panel to at least make it appear as if it's straight, or in this case, I'm going to use a die, and I'm going to use my T-square ruler to line it up along with the grid lines on my work surface, but that's certainly not necessary. You can kind of eyeball it, and again, as long as it looks straight to you, it's going to look straight to whoever's looking at it. So again, like I said, going to bring out that T-square ruler, kind of get this lined up using those straight lines on my work surface. That way I can line up that stitched rectangle die. And you do want to make sure before you run anything through your die cutting machine, especially something that you absolutely can't have shift around, stick that down with some washi tape or some Post-it note tape so that it stays in one spot while it's going through your die cutting machine. So once I did run this through my Gemini and removed that Post-it note tape, you can see that at least to the eye, this is a lot more straight than it was before. And again, as long as it looks straight, I'm good. So I went ahead and colored this image off camera with my Copic markers, and I did make a few mistakes. So a couple ways you can fix your coloring mistakes. First, as long as it's a lighter color, so yellows and light browns and light greens and light blues, you can use your colorless blender. And here I'm going to start away from the image and kind of push that color in. Now, if it's a darker area like this, I'm just going to use my white gel pen and just touch up that area. Now, if you look very, very closely, you'll see the white gel pen, but from a distance, and like I said, that recipient didn't know you made a mistake, you'll never be able to see it. Next, we're going to talk about something that we probably do on most of our cards, and that is having an ink smudge or some sort of smudge on your card panel. So before I do that, I went ahead and stamped out my sentiment, and on purpose, I didn't stamp it well. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. And I also created an ink smudge. I just tapped my finger on my ink pad there and then just lightly tapped onto my card panel. Now, in order to fix this, you will need a sand eraser in order to completely take it away. You do want to make sure that your ink is completely dry. This is a pigment ink, so I did wait a minute before the ink was dry. And when you use your sand eraser, the key is to go with very light pressure. So you just want to take a little bit off at a time. If you go too hard, you're going to completely tear your paper. So once that's done, you can see that that ink smudge is completely gone. Next is frayed card bases, and I know this has happened to everybody. We score it, we fold it, we use the bone folder, and yet we still have those frayed edges. Now, this won't make it perfect, but it will make it less noticeable by using just a regular eraser, not a sand eraser, just a regular eraser, and going over that crease will make it look a little bit more clean. Don't throw away the paper, it's usable. So next we're going to talk about either adhering your panel to your card base crooked or, as I do most of the time, upside down. And so I'm going to use my wet glue, which will help in this case because if you catch it in time and before the wet glue dries, you can peel it up and move it around. But this case, I let it dry for a couple of minutes so that it is permanent. Two ways that you can fix this, two very easy ways that you can fix this. Number one, you can trim it down. So I'm just going to basically create a mat for my main panel, and then I can adhere this to another card base. Is it going to be a little bit thicker than I wanted? Yes, but sometimes we have to change things up when we make a mistake. Another way that you can fix this is by completely removing that original panel with your heat gun. The heat gun, as long as you heat it from behind, it will melt that adhesive. The key is to work in small areas at a time. So you can see that I'm just working in that corner, letting that adhesive melt a little bit and peeling off just a little bit at a time. If you heat the entire panel, by the time you try to tear that off, the adhesive has already dried. It dries pretty quickly. So you can see that I'm just kind of moving my way around the panel. And yes, it will be a little bit warped, but you will save your card panel. When I adhere this to a new card base, I'm just going to add a little bit extra adhesive to make sure this sticks down straight. And you can always put it under something heavy or run it through your die cutting machine without any die and to flatten that down. Next, we're going to fix that crooked sentiment or that sentiment that just wasn't stamped right. And the simplest way to do this is just by simply adding a sentiment strip. So I'm going to use some black cardstock here. You can use any color cardstock you want. And I'm going to go ahead and heat emboss my sentiment. I treated that with my anti-static tool. I am stamping this down with some Versamark ink, and then I'll sprinkle on some white embossing powder. Again, you don't even have to emboss this. You can create a white sentiment strip with just that same black ink if you prefer. Once my embossing powder was melted and kind of cooled down a little bit, I'll go ahead and trim this down into a strip. Now you want your strip to be a little bit bigger than your sentiment because you're going to have to cover up that ink that you have on your card panel itself. Once that's done, I'll add a little bit of foam tape to the back of that and just pop that up directly over my crooked and horribly stamped sentiment that I have on my card panel. As long as you don't add any pressure to your foam tape, you can kind of move this around, make sure that it's centered or at least centered to the eye, and that is it. Now, as far as that ink smudge, I was able to get rid of that ink smudge with my sand eraser, but if you can't, just cover it up. I'm going to bring out some Nouveau drops and just add those around the sentiment, and nobody will ever know that that ink smudge was ever there. So that is just a few mistakes that are very, very common in card making, ones that I do all the time. And that's a few ways that you can easily fix them. Don't get discouraged. Don't throw away the card. I promise it's salvageable. Thanks so much for stopping by today, guys, and have a great day. Bye.